There we go.
That's our special intro for a real special guest we have today, Nick Ben at Hominem. And we have the one, the only, Dan Beaulieu. Dan.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Quite the music to bring me into. I don't think there's anything more appropriate than that. I am a sexy boy like Shawn Michaels. But yeah, thanks for having me.
No, yeah, Dan, thanks for joining us. I have to say that you're kind of the inspiration that brought Ben and I back to doing this, right? Ben was on your show. We went over this last week. Ben was on your show. It got our juices flowing, right? We wanted to get back into it. We saw what you were doing. We loved what you were doing, but we figured how fitting would it be to have our first guest be Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I had a great time on Dan's show, similar format to ours now. We definitely drew some inspiration from Let Freedom Ring, and couldn't think of a better first guest to have. Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell the audience some things that they should know about you, being one of the more interesting figures on social media in New Hampshire, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I always try to live by never have a dull moment. So that's kind of how I go about my business. But yeah, I'm from Nashua, New Hampshire, living just a town over now in Merrimack. A very proud New Hampshire resident. I never try to deny that in any way, shape, or form. Softball, hardo. Love my softball. Love my hiking. Got my own show, like you've just mentioned, Let Freedom Ring, which kind of spun from my love of pro wrestling, where my buddy Leo Connors has his own show in Nashville called The Ring and All Other Sports. And he was kind of my inspiration to get into public access, which is initially the start of it. We're not in a studio right now, but hoping to get back in there real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Not being in the studio is can definitely be a challenge. But if your Freedom Ring podcast has shown anything, you find a way, and it can still be successful and something that people want to watch.
Yeah, and what I like about it too, Dan, is the diversity between like the diversity of the folks that you bring on, but also the diversity of opinions. Like, you're not afraid to have anybody who's willing to come on the show and tailor that show to them. I think that there's a lot to be said for that, right? Because most people want to get somebody on a show and peddle sort of an agenda. That's not what you do. So it's commendable.
Yeah. I mean, what I always wanted with that is what my goal with that show is to have real people, real opinions, and what I really want to work on the show too is just getting more stories out of people. I've talked to my buddy Chris many times, and he said, you know what, Dan, out of all the things that I love about you most, you're quite the storyteller. And hopefully I can get some more on there. And the other thing is I want more female guests as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, I have a perfect segue for this because I would say probably my opinion now, this is strictly my opinion. The second greatest thing that I've been a part of as Dan Beaulieu and what you're affiliated with is
Beaulieu. It is, by the way.
Okay, wow. Wow. Okay,
so also very proud Frenchman as well.
Yeah. I get it. That's good. My father, who's French Canadian, would be ashamed of my pronunciation. So I could say that. So I would say the show itself is probably my second favorite thing that you do outside of obviously the Turkey Bowl.
Yep.
Explain to the folks who aren't a part of it, how that came about, what it is. I guess a little bit of a plug here for you.
Sure. The Turkey Bowl is essentially a flag football pickup tournament. I've been running for 2010 I started. It really started, when you're all in your early 20s and no one's married or people are just starting to get married, you could go play football every Saturday is what we used to do. We played at Pennachuck Junior High School, and it transformed into that year. We basically decided, well, let's do a tournament at the end of this and call it a season. And essentially that's what we did. And then it just started kind of growing. And then I was like, well, this should be more than just an annual. Let's make a reason we do this. And that's where the canned food drive kind of came into play. And trying to just give back to the community. And we've brought all kinds of different people into the Turkey Bowl. I've seen some crazy things over the years at the Turkey Bowl. But yeah, it's a blast. And for anybody I've ever yelled at one of those events, I apologize. That's but it is hard. It is hard, but I do have a lot of the right people in place to make it work really well now. So,
yeah. What is your opinion now? Maybe the best team that you've seen in the history of the Turkey Bowl. Who would that be? I mean, you've been running for a while. It's talking a decade now.
well, there's an ultimate matchup that I think a lot of people have wanted to see. Because I would call you guys. Our team was Team Sean Gill, but the Forsyth brothers have been a force in the Turkey. I think they've won the same amount. They've won 3, but they're not consistently there every year because they have a very successful blitz football team called the Nashua Vikings. They've sort of split off in that, but every year the Forsyth brothers have been a trio with whatever team they brought, they've won. So that is a showdown, with it being, we did have the 10th Turkey Bowl this year, but this would be the 10th year really anniversary. Maybe we need to have some all-star teams come back and find out who is the ultimate Turkey Bowl champ, if we're even allowed to play flag football by then.
Right. Wow.
That's crazy to think about that, depending on what the situation is and whether there's a resurgence, whether that'll even be possible to get a bunch of guys together in a park to play football. But yeah, I mean, I agree that needs to happen if there's another team in contention because I think us as well as guys like Graham Lito, Sean Gill, Ben Glover, Paul Critter, we would rise to the challenge considering we're 2 for 2 when we participated as a full team, and we've never even lost a game in the Turkey Bowl, never mind lost a championship. So yeah. To segue over to that, because obviously discussing the possibility of that not even being possible, I do want to talk about the COVID-19 situation. It obviously impacts our lives quite a bit. It's the reason that we're doing this on Skype instead of potentially in a studio. How have you been? How have you been handling it? What do you think about the state reopening this week? How do you think that's gone? Where can you see things moving from here?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely I've had a drastic change in my life. Obviously, working from home pretty consistently. But as things have evolved, I've been doing a little bit more here and a little bit more there. As far as seeing people and stuff like that. I mean, you still could be taking a risk depending on if you could contract this somewhere. But my thing too is my family means a lot to me. Obviously, I wouldn't want to get them sick, but I have missed them. So I have seen them a little bit more than, I'm sure other people have. With that being said, I think Chris Sununu in the state of New Hampshire has actually handled this really well. I don't disagree with a lot of the reopening, and my whole thing that I've taken away from COVID-19, I'm no freaking expert, and I don't think anybody is. And you might have to do some trial by error. If it starts to break out worse after this, well then we know we got to pull back. If it doesn't, maybe we get to open up more stuff. But fact is, you can do 2 things at once. You can slow down the spread and you can keep the economy going, in my honest belief, if you put some restrictions in.
Yeah, to go along with that, Dan, as you know, I'm in North Carolina now. And I was telling Ben last week, we were actually under a state of emergency before the state of New York. Because the first, like some of the first cases, identified cases were through the area I actually live, which is like Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina now. We've been locked down ever since. We're about to go into what they call phase 2 of reopening in North Carolina. And actually, it was contingent on not seeing a spike in some of the rates, right? They have seen a spike in cases since phase 1's opening a couple weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago now. However, because the hospitals aren't inundated and aren't overrun right now with cases that they're actively treating, sure, the confirmed case count is up, but hospitalizations overall are down, and that's like the big thing. That's why they're still moving forward with phase 2. So I'm curious how New Hampshire's going to react. I mean, you guys have a better sort of pulse on things than I would.
It's interesting you say that, because isn't that the whole point of flattening the curve, is to slow down what's going on in the hospitals?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's really what it's come down to. We know there was going to be people were going to die from this,
Right.
but we couldn't overflood the hospitals. So it's like the biggest, I think, like the biggest thing that has to do with how we are doing things. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's one thing. The stay at home orders, the quarantine, the social distancing. That was never about making sure people don't get it. I mean, it was a scientific foregone conclusion that people were going to get this virus, and that and that the way you try and approach it and use those tactics is to flatten the curve, and is to make sure that the hospitals um, aren't overwhelmed. Um, Moving on to something that came out this week, and really only Colorado papers have reported it. But this isn't necessarily something that you need to speak to specifically. There was a report that Colorado had changed the amount of COVID deaths that they had by about 24%. It was a reduction from a little over 1,000 to 800 and something. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, obviously there's been a lot of criticism of the president, how he's handled it. There's been a lot of criticism of Congress and the different agendas both sides are pushing on these bills that are supposed to be meant to stimulate the economy and help the middle class. And then there's also the media who, the way they report things, the things they leave out, the different information they share. It's been kind of a mess. In your opinion, and like I said, you don't need to speak on the first part of that if you don't want to. You certainly can. But in your opinion, who has handled this the worst? Has it been Trump's response, the way Trump handles it, the way the media handles it, the way Congress has responded? Where do you think the improvements can be made most? Who do you think has handled it the worst out of those three major, sources?
before I get to the worst, I'll say who's handled it the best: the healthcare workers, working their
Yep.
asses off
Yep.
across the country. So they should be commended, and they're not in any position of power. They're doing their job. So however they handle it, I'm
Right.
giving them an A+ on it. As far as the government, I feel like the world botched this in a lot of ways, not just the United States. I don't think anybody was ready for a pandemic, or to this magnitude. Um, do I think the government's done a great job? I don't know. We have all kinds of issues. $1,200 wasn't going to cut it for a lot of people. That's our money. That's thanks for giving me back my money that
Yeah.
I paid you bastards anyways. You could have made that check a little bigger, but as far, it's tough. It's tough because I feel like a lot of people go around in circles about how the president handled it or decisions he made. The issue with the president is, and I think all three of us have an issue with, is how he conducts himself day to day. And him going on early on calling this a hoax, a Democratic hoax. Don't wait, I'm sick of this guy wasting our goddamn time with bullshit. Don't even do the press conferences anymore. If it's hard to say he did a good job when he's acting like an asshole all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And it reflects the leadership, and his leadership sucks. And unfortunately, I mean, I'd give him. It's a tough position to be in. Not something, it tells you just can't take somebody off the streets and make him president. I really wish he would have held some kind of other office before taking that. I'd give him a C minus. I don't think this is all on him, but he's got to put his big boy pants on and stop being a prick on TV 24/7.
Well, I respect the Kobe Bryant quote with the big boy pants. That was respect to the Kobe Bryant quote there. I'd agree with you. I think Dan's spot on. I'll let you touch on the media, but I actually I agree.
Oh, I didn't even touch on them, but I'll let you guys take that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The media, it all depends on who you listen to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good, Ben. I know that you want to chime in. Ben is a Dan. Just so you know, Donald Trump. I had this theory that he was going to win the election. The way he was going to win the election when he did was he was going to have this voting contingent that was going to go undecided to the polls and then get behind that little white cloak, and they were going to check his name and then walk out and pretend they didn't do it. Ben was one of those people. So he wants to chime in. I'm sure.
I feel like Ben like wrote in John Kasich or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I have my own theories on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't vote for Trump. I absolutely didn't vote for Hillary Clinton either. But I did not vote for Donald Trump. And yeah, I mean, as far as the way the president has handled it, I would give him a slightly higher grade. I'd go like C plus. The only reason I give him a better kind of than middling grade, like a CC minus, is just because while I agree that the way that he's handled things in the media, the press conferences, the kind of visibility of his leadership has been awful. I do think that some of that has to do with the questions the media are asking him, and how every single approach that they take to press conferences is to try and push him into a corner and make him political. I've said all along, I think in terms of those press conferences, I wish we were having the scientific, portions of the media, the health portion of the media asking these questions instead of the political portion of the media, because I think the information that we would get from his administration as well as the media would be a lot more consistent and a lot more helpful to the average person. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Donald Trump, I agree. He's an asshole, and I would give him a similar grade.
The funny thing with Trump and the war in the media created Trump.
Oh yeah,
They created him in the 80s, not now.
Right.
They've created this monster.
Yep.
And I honestly think they enjoy going back and forth with him, and he likes going back and forth with them in this whole tirade of nonsense, But anyway,
I like watching it. I can't lie. I like watching it. I mean,
it's hard to look away.
Yeah, it really is. A Biden-Trump debate is something that, I mean, I feel like I can die happy after that, because we could see epic reality TV on a stage nationally.
Well, and you know what? It's a lot easier to see it as entertaining, knowing that, in the grand scheme of things, the presidency is one of the least important positions in terms of how things get done, what creates policy, what puts policy in place, right? I mean, the Congress, the Senate, your local governments, your governor, your mayor is always going to be more important than the president of the United States to you personally, for the most part. So if you can keep that in mind and, don't believe that Trump is the next Hitler, then it is a little bit more easy to see it as, a little bit entertaining.
So, Dan, I have a question for you before we end this topic. What's your prediction for sort of when we put this behind us? I always ask that question. I've been asking that question to a lot of people down here, but when do we return back to a quote unquote normal? And I hate using that term because our new normal is probably not going to be the same, but you catch my drift, I think.
I mean, honestly, my opinion, I think before the end of the calendar year. I know a lot of people, I think we'll still be doing I think things are going to change. I don't think you're going to go up to your buddy and hug them all the time. I don't think you're going to shake their hand. I think you're going to, you're going to do things. People are going to be a little bit more conscious. Conscious of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that we'll see things. It's just going to change, but I think we will go back to a sense of normalcy. I don't see COVID-19 ever going away. I talked about this on my show very early on, because if you watch the first 3 episodes of Let Freedom Ring, which of course I started a show right before a pandemic, we talked about this where we said, the flu's been here. This is going to be maybe the new flu. It's a little bit different, but it's not really going to go anywhere, and it's going to be here to stay, and we're going to have to figure out, a way to deal with it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if it isn't this, I think it's proven that with the way things are evolving and the more research people are doing, it's possible that it could be something else. So for sure, we need to make sure that this never happens again to this magnitude. And be prepared the next time. But I agree, it's always going to be something at this point that we need to be prepared for, as far as a pandemic or different illnesses that could just spring up out of nowhere. Going into that, obviously with COVID-19, there's people doing some crazy stuff. And obviously everything in the media is a lot more polarizing as well, because when things happen, there's not a lot of people outside doing other stuff to take their mind off it. They're always tuned into the media. And so the recent Ahmaud Arbery shooting, obviously I'm sure you've seen that in the news. You've seen the video. My question to you is, what are your thoughts on that? In general. And then the other thing is, obviously there has been a huge racial element that developed extremely early in the media. Immediately very prominent figures on social media coming out and saying, a black man can't even go jogging without getting shot. What do you think in terms of the degree of the racial element that's brought to this story and to stories like this in general?
So when it comes to race in this country, I don't try to be any kind of expert. So when I really try to figure stuff out, then I like to talk to people that actually lived in the South and have dealt with it on their own. I've had some guests that had to talk about their time growing up in Kentucky and things that went on there, that they're not surprised that things like this are still going on. Now, I lived my whole life in New Hampshire, so I've been to the South. I don't notice too much of it. I've seen some stuff, but nothing. I never saw racism right in my face down there while I spent time there. So it's really hard for me to be an expert on the going-ons in other places.
Right.
However, you hear these stories a lot. This one, everything kind of looks like, what do these guys do? What are you doing? Regardless, this guy's unarmed. Why are you pulling a gun on him? That's that. You can put the race part away from it.
Right.
What are you doing shooting this guy? Well, right. Why say they had an altercation, right? Why does the first thing have to be to go for a peace? Whatever happened to fighting with your fists and being a man? So that's, but I think that's part of why people see the race element. Why was he so quick to go to his gun? Is there a fear for some of white America? Now, I've never felt this way. I'm a white man, but is there a fear of black people and certain people in white America, and they are quick to pull a trigger on somebody?
Right.
It makes you wonder. Now, there's more of this story. Apparently, he'd been getting water out of that house that was being built or whatever was going on. Right. So they knew who. It sounds like they knew who he was. Whole thing just looks bad. And I mean, these guys are guilty of something. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you too, just from, I've been down here, North Carolina very much is the South, especially in some parts of the state. And I can tell you just from what I've seen, it's racial divides are much more they're much more alluded to, I would say, than back home, back in like New Hampshire and the Northeast. It's something that's like more openly kind of conversed about, if you will, even in like a progressive area like where I live in, like the highest population part of the state in this Raleigh Durham Triangle area. You still have those folks that are like, oh, like you just got to be careful because this is like a black neighborhood, or you got to, you know what I mean? And like just that sort of connotation is still pretty prevalent. I always make the joke to people down here that, hey, you guys are always a little ways behind the North in terms of intelligence. That's why all the Ivy League schools are in the Northeast, right? So, but anyway, it is. I wasn't surprised that it happened in the South, right? Like I'd be surprised to see something like that go on in. It's more surprising to see it go on in like a place like New Hampshire, a place like Boston, a place like New York City, right?
And
It'd
it
be
does
way
still
more.
happen there.
Right, and it does. And it does. To me, that those are the more shocking situations. It doesn't make it less sad. Um, but I think that, I mean, it's still, the South has a long ways to go as far as like, you know, getting to a point where equality is something it's not even widely discussed. It's still sort of an afterthought in a lot of places, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think up here it's kind of a foregone conclusion, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's harder to see things up here is because in a lot of situations the diversity is kind of universally accepted in the Northeast in general. I think in this particular situation, it's a tragedy. These guys, I'm surprised it took so long, but these guys definitely needed to be arrested and charged. Depending on the way they formulate the defense and what they say, if there's stuff that we don't know about, who knows what's going to come of it. But I've been one of the people saying all along that these stand your ground and citizen arrest laws in some of these states are just a little bit ridiculous. If
Yeah.
the father, who's a trained police officer, wanted to grab his gun because he's trained, he knows how to use it, he knows how to apprehend somebody and use it more for safety than for anything else, fine. Taking your son along and letting him carry the shotgun and be the guy to get out and try and apprehend this guy without any training whatsoever. It's just a stupid decision all around. And whether there is or isn't a racial element to it, whether these guys were trying to go out there because of the way he looked, or if they legitimately were just concerned that he had broken into a house and was getting away. Either way, the way they handled it and the fact that it resulted in this young gentleman's death is a pure tragedy, and I guess we'll see what comes of it.
And one point to that, I talked about this on my show. We will never make progress. I think we have made some, so don't get me wrong. We won't make more progress with racism until we're willing to have real conversations about racism. And that's something that most people are terrified to do because they're afraid to face their own bias or their own prejudice. But I can tell you, when I had a friend of mine on my show, black man, and that he has to tell his kids, even in New Hampshire, I don't feel comfortable with you leaving the house with your hood. Don't put your hood on while you're out.
Right.
So one thing when it always comes to race is I'm not a black man and I don't know, and I can never explain I would never tell them how to feel when it comes to a situation like this because I don't know what it's like at all.
Right. Right. I
Yeah,
think it's
I agree with that. I do think that going back to what you were saying in terms of having tough and important conversations, absolutely, that's part of us facing our own bias and realizing that as much as we want to empathize in certain situations, we just can't because we don't know where that individual is coming from or the way they grew up, or we don't have the same skin color. That being said, I also think that on the other side, it is important to be able to ask those questions and to be able to say, well, I want to try and understand how that feels, needing to tell your sons that, but also, you know, can we have a conversation about it rather than you just saying, I'll never know what that feels like, and therefore, I can't have an opinion on it.
Yeah,
Or
I think you're right. That sometimes goes, and you have, guys like Steven Crowder's that said, how come I can't have an opinion on this? Because you don't want to, you're right. We won't make progress if we can't have conversations, and it's such a tough topic, and we
yeah,
have such a
Yeah.
black eye on this country over
Yeah.
things that have happened in the past.
yeah,
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It really is.
I think my take has always been, and I think Ben, you've heard me say this before, is my take around it has always been when we stop looking at, I like to call it sort of like the grandparents model, where they, my grandparents used to sit there and say, oh, this so and so is a black man from, or so and so's, an Asian man from. When we just start looking at people as just a person, right?
Yeah.
Like so and so is just a man. You know what I mean? Like I think that's sort of like erasing the whole like putting a color before somebody is just being an individual once we get out of that mindset, I think that we'll be in a better place. That's always been my take on it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, as I was a kid, I was lucky. Nashville was actually more diverse than you were. There was a big
Right.
Hispanic
Yep.
part of the community. I have a lot of Spanish friends I grew up with, and we never really thought about that stuff.
Right.
I don't think I thought about race till I became an adult,
Right.
to be
yeah,
honest.
yep.
Yeah. That's a
So
great point. That's a great point. I think that's yeah, that's absolutely fair. I think we could all say the same.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, even even in Manchester, I mean, I used to, I had a lot of friends around me that I grew up knowing from basketball and football that didn't look the same as I did. And we were stopped a couple of times, just riding around in my car, and for me it was like, oh, getting stopped, I wonder what this is about. And some of them would go, absolutely rigid and just not want to move, look extremely nervous. And again, those are the only things that came up when I was a kid that would make me think about it. What experience do they have that changes their perception of that situation so much compared to me. But other than that, it was business as usual. Those guys were some of my best friends, and it never came up other than that. To use this as a segue, we do want to move on to something a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more fun. Uh,
A
so,
little bit.
yeah,
good segue.
sports. Obviously, we're all huge fans of sports in general. Um,
They were great, weren't they?
Hey, I got Korean
Great.
baseball. Ain't bad. It
That's
ain't
right,
bad.
baby. Korean baseball. That was it. It's almost like you knew the agenda, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sports are obviously coming back, slowly but surely. We've had two UFC events in the last week. We had a golf event recently sponsored by TaylorMade, raised like $5 million for a couple of organizations supporting the frontline workers in this pandemic. What have you been doing to cope, and where do you see sports, moving forward? What are some of your opinions on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could easily. Well, I've been coping with the KBO. Go Samsung Lions. They're on a losing streak right now, so I haven't been too happy about that. But I think NBA and the NHL are going to figure it out, and they're going to do their playoffs, whether that's at Disney World or wherever the heck they do it. Baseball's a little bit more complicated. It looks like they put out what the restrictions are going to be, and I'd be like, yeah, if I was already a millionaire, I'd say I'm not doing it. Like, honestly, I went through it. They talked about it on Pardon the Interruption the other day, and Kornheiser and Wilbon went through it. And I was like, who would agree to do any of these restrictions? This is a lot.
Right.
Um, so I don't see baseball. Maybe. I mean, I could be wrong. Or it looks like the minor leagues are going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe you give them some incentive to fill in for the year. We'll see. Um, I also got WWE. That didn't go anywhere. So, I've been watching out of the Performance Center. So I've been making things work. I think we'll see some kind of NFL this year. They're already working on face masks that could make it so they're not, spreading this anymore. But it's been rough. I watched a lot of old sports, a lot of games that I haven't seen in many, many years. So um, my hope you'll see the end of the NHL and NBA. If we get the MLB, that'd be great, but I don't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no, that's good. Dan, I just want you to know I'm part of I noticed you were a big Samsung Lions guy, and I was invited very early on to a Korean League fantasy baseball
Oh,
league.
really?
Yeah. So you can imagine how difficult it was to pick people in the draft, not knowing a single person. So I rolled with my guy, Matt Williams, who's the manager for the Kia Tigers. They're terrible. And I took a
We
lot
beat
of guys.
up on them a little bit.
I know.
They
I
beat up
saw
on
that.
us though too. So
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Also, my wife drives a Kia, so I felt obligated at that point. I might as well. But yeah, been following Kia baseball, and I can't wait for sports to get back. Although soccer is starting, I know you guys aren't big fans, but the Bundesliga just started this past weekend, and it was weird. They gave those guys no time to train. There was literally nobody in the stands, and you could hear these guys yelling in a language that you don't understand. But I can only imagine it was all curse words. Um, it was interesting seeing soccer in empty stadiums where typically, especially in Germany, a place like Germany, where it's, they're throwing flares and they got the big banners and all this sort of stuff. And it is just crickets. You can hear the players clear as day out on the field. It was weird. So I hope, although I do believe that we're going to get sports kind of like that when they come back initially, I hope that that's not going to be the case. We'll see.
Now, in terms of activity, Dan, because obviously this has affected just your everyday Joe, in terms of the things that they like to do on a day-to-day basis as far as athletics go. I know you're usually playing softball during this time of year. I did see on social media you had a picture with some golf clubs.
yeah.
Nick and I both have the golf bug. Have you gotten out there yet? What do you think about it so far?
I haven't got out there. I got these for about $40 off someone just trying to get rid of them.
That's a
And
steal. It's a steal.
I got a bunch of softball buddies. We're talking about going. I've been hitting the balls that don't move, just off on the side.
Yep.
Because I think some driving ranges are. I've been golfing once in my life, so I don't know much about it. But if it's something to do and I can go drink beers and hang out, then yeah, you sign me up. Where do I sign? I'll drive the car. I don't care.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I love it, Dan. I got into it recently, and it's one of those things where I just get out there and every time I hit the ball, I ask myself, how am I so bad at this? Why am I so bad at this? But it's really one of those things. And I think, Ben, you played much longer than I have, but it's one of those things where the more you play and the more fun you have, and you start to pick up little tips and tricks. And I mean, I'm in North Carolina, like I said, so there's a golf course. There's about 50 of them within a 10-minute radius of where I live. Ben's been jealous. They've been open the whole time. I've been golfing all through COVID.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been golfing for about, this will be my 5th season, and I do plan on getting out there later this week. And so from what I hear, especially people that get into it from our age, you about 5 years watching YouTube videos and doing everything you can to learn your own swing, just enough so that you can get out there and know you suck, but hit a couple of great shots every round to want to keep coming back.
That's
and then
right.
Usually around the 5th year, you take lessons, and then the next thing you know, you knock 10 strokes off of your game. So that's kind of where I am. I've spoken recently on social media. I'm doing the keto diet right now and trying to drop some weight. But once I'm at a weight where I think I can get a consistent swing, lessons are definitely the next step. And to save you guys some trouble, you may just want to consider starting with that instead of spending 5 years being a double bogey golfer like I have.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably, I just love to get out there, probably just for the hanging out aspect and being out and about. you know, I thought my softball career was over last year when I tore my rotator cuff. So, I mean,
That's
who
right.
knows? You know, I thought maybe I was going to have to retire to golf, but now you got this. So we'll see.
Yeah. Ben, you have another. You had written down here on the agenda. Getting Dan's thoughts on Gronk putting his wrestling career on hold and joining Tom Brady in Tampa. How are you feeling about that? Because I mean, Dan, I know you as a lifelong New England Patriots fan, right? And I
Yep.
think that my opinion. Now, this is my opinion. I'm not a Tom Brady guy or a Patriots guy. We all are aware of this. But I can give kudos to somebody like you who grew up in the era of like Ben Coates, right? Like those sort of Patriots. It's the folks who, were Packers fans or Broncos fans or Cowboys fans, and now they're back.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are the folks I can't say.
You can't make a jump. I never really had as a kid, I'll tell you this. The only thing I cared about for most of my like grades, like elementary school years, yeah, I watched the Patriots, cared about Drew Bledsoe. I probably had a Dolphins jacket because I just liked the logo. But baseball was my thing. That's what I cared about was baseball because I played baseball.
Right.
But as you get older, probably around middle school is when I realized I was like, no, you can only root for the teams around you. Is when I started being like, you can't be because I always liked the Braves and I still have a soft spot, but I was like, I'm not from Atlanta. I'm from here. So
Right.
I never understood that fanhood of why do you give a shit about a team that lives nowhere near? Now I know you guys like other teams, and there's probably reasons for it.
Yeah.
But
Please.
I've been a homer, and the only team right that I'll ever have a soft spot for is the Atlanta Braves outside of the New England teams. But
And they
to
were in
your
Boston. They were in Boston at one point.
They were. And the other thing about the Braves where they were on TBS every night. So when
Right.
you're in first grade, you don't know the difference between the Red Sox and the Braves because you couldn't watch the Red Sox every night, but you could watch the Braves on TBS.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. Yeah, the Braves were broadcasted all the time.
Yep.
So do you think that it's going to be how big of a loss is it? Not so much personally or for your fandom for Gronk joining Brady in Tampa, but how much of a loss is it wrestling wise? Like, do you think that the WWE is going to be reeling after that, or I mean, what? I'm curious.
You want my honest opinion? Gronk,
Yeah.
stay away from wrestling. You sucked as the host of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
You brought absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
The only thing you can get out of this is maybe R-Truth sneaks on the field and pins him for the 24/7 title. Other than that,
Wow.
Wow.
Gronk,
Yeah. Wow.
Gronk had a great moment at WrestleMania 30. Shit, I want to say 33 or whatever. Right before Jinder Mahal actually won the title, and they did this whole rewrite where they're gonna have Jinder Mahal win the title. There was a Andre the Giant Battle Royal, and he helped Mojo Rawley go on to win it, and he helped him take out Jinder Mahal. And he eliminated him. Mojo Rawley won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. Oh God, Gronk. And that was a cool moment. And if he just stopped there, it would have been like, yeah, that was cool. Gronk had a WrestleMania moment. Didn't help Mojo's career in any way because he's still not even mid-card. But yeah, don't come back and host WrestleMania. You brought nothing to the table.
So it's fair. It's probably fair to say that he probably hung. It sounds like Gronk tried to hold on to wrestling too long, like Brady's doing with football.
I think Gronk was it.
Is that fair? Do you think?
I just don't think Gronk would ever really truly get over with a wrestling audience.
Right.
If he now picture this now, he'd probably be a special attraction, right? You put him on pay-per-view here and there. You ain't gonna have Gronk be on Raw every single week because those people will eat you alive. Ronda Rousey was spent on the fans and she walked away. She couldn't handle getting booed. And Gronk would get the same reaction after a while because wrestling fans, they get a lot of crap, but they're some of the smartest fans in anything. So they know crap when they see it.
It's funny, Dan. I'm gonna Ben. Sorry, I have to bring it. I have to go to the next subject because I grew up. And Dan, you might not even know this about me, is I grew up as probably one of the biggest wrestling fans around. You know, I followed the Attitude Era. I mean, Stone Cold Steve Austin, I had three idols growing up, right? And my three idols growing up were Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mike Tyson, and Tupac Shakur. All three of those people were, I mean, I love those guys.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. 2 out of 3 of those pretty good.
I mean, those were my guys. And yeah, I never missed. If I knew Stone Cold was going to be there, if there was a hint that Stone Cold was going to be on Raw, was going to be on SmackDown, whatever it may be, I was tuning in. I'm curious because you've stayed a wrestling loyalist this entire time.
29 years.
Whew, what a career, and still going. Give me, how would you rate the Attitude Era based on versus what wrestling has become now? How would you rate that? Because it's so different, I can imagine. And I'll be honest, I fell off when Stone Cold left.
Yeah, people aren't going to like this. The Attitude Era is overhyped.
Wow, there it is.
It's a very overhyped era. Now, why did you like it so much? Because there was competition between Nitro and Raw. And that's really what sparked a lot of creativity, right? But the fact of the matter is, if you go back and watch a lot of Attitude Era stuff outside of the main event, it's not that good.
No, that's fair.
The mid card was really bad, and Vince Russo was very obsessed with the Jerry Springer. Let's add Jerry Springer to wrestling, and that's what a lot of the Attitude Era was. You know, Val Venus getting his penis chopped off by Kai and Tai, like that's garbage. Yes. You know what I mean? So a lot of that, and it was and when Russo eventually went to Nitro without Vince, you realize this guy wasn't as talented as everybody thought he was because he had Vince McMahon, you know. So I'd say the main event aspects of the Attitude Era and some of the, you know, like The Rock and Triple H when they were in kind of the mid-card parts were good. Most of it, C-. See,
really? Wow. My mind is blown, Dan. My mind is blown because I look back on it and I think about like those Mankind type cage matches, right?
Main event though. That's
right. The main event stuff, I guess, is what you think about. You think about like Austin with the beer truck, Kurt Angle with the milk truck. Like all these things are so iconic. I think about Stone Cold and Booker T. Remember in the grocery store.
But that's not Attitude Era though. At that point, you're probably Ruthless Aggression Era already. Booker T and Austin. But the question is, a lot of people don't talk about is when did the Attitude Era actually end?
That's fair. Fair.
And for me, the end is when they bought WCW. But truly, it probably ended around 2000. Wow. Because WCW was if you watch WCW 2000 is absolutely unwatchable. The product was that bad.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you want to cap it, we'll say the Attitude Era is like the end of 97 to 2001 when they bought WCW.
Wow. So you would say what were you calling it? The Ruthless Aggression Era, you would say was probably like when the Alliance came on and you had that whole WWE.
Well, I almost put the Alliance in their own little thing because that was absolute horrible. When
Stone Cold stunned every member of the Alliance in that ring that night. I mean, that was one of my greatest childhood moments.
He then joined the Alliance.
Sure did.
You know,
like a true heel. Sure did.
It turned into an absolute just a cluster of. They didn't get the top stars, so they really shouldn't have even done the angle. If you didn't have Goldberg, you didn't have Hollywood Hogan, you didn't have Scott Hall, you didn't have Kevin Nash. You got DDP and Booker T as the only two main event guys.
And Taz.
Well, Taz was already working for. Well, then you got the ECW guys, so they could add Rob Van Dam, who was a big name. Rhino was moving up at the time, but still, ECW wasn't really the rival to WWF. So the whole I put that in its own little like, what the hell was that? Not that I didn't enjoy it, because I've enjoyed a lot of it. Yeah. And what wrestling fans do better is shit on wrestling. But I still like the Attitude Era. I think today though, the athletes are better, the matches are better. Yeah, the storylines aren't Jerry Springer-esque, and I never really, I guess teenage me probably liked it, but adult me looks at that stuff and goes, yeah, it's 35-year-old Dan ain't into that.
So you would put like you would put when Chris Jericho was really coming into his own, when Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, that was all ruthless aggression era in.
I guess you might have to maybe you have to put that in the attitude. It's tough because ruthless aggression, they really made it. They called it that. They had
Right.
Vince McMahon come out and say it in 2002 because he knew he needed a rebranding. I guess you could put that attitude. When I think of the attitude era, I think of 1998 and 1999. Those are the
I,
peaks of it.
I think of that's where I guess like that's my thing is when I think of the Attitude Era, I think of those great matchups like Austin and Triple H with the chair and the sledgehammer. I think about like those main event type matches.
Well, and I guess that still is because you're talking about No Way Out 2001.
Yep, sure am.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah. The three-way, the 3 stages of hell, or whatever it was.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's unfair to me to cut that off and say that isn't. It's just when I think Attitude Era, that's really what I think is 98, 99, and I guess 2000 to a degree. 2001 things got really weird once they bought WCW. It just didn't feel the same.
For me, it got weird when they let The Rock beat Austin at WrestleMania for nothing. So that's what it got weird for me.
Well, there was more. There was actually something to that.
Well, he had never done it. He had never.
Austin was done. He almost died the night before. He went into shock.
That's right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
They put The Rock over for him to walk away. So.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. That is true.
I think he put Goldberg over, and that was it. So.
Well, Dan, that segment in particular, I was really looking forward to getting your take on because we don't get to really talk wrestling with folks who have stayed loyal the entire time. You know what I mean?
I mean, wrestling, I love wrestling. I mean, I go to all the independent stuff around here, big supporter of local wrestling. Suggest a lot of people do that, Chaotic Wrestling, Beyond, Limitless Wrestling out of Maine, just some companies that, if there are wrestling fans watching that, once we can go to wrestling shows again, that's what I recommend.
How about Superhuman?
He's entertaining. A lot.
Sure.
It's funny. Maverick Wild, who I'm Facebook friends with. Now, Maverick Wild is a local independent wrestler who actually had a match on WCW Nitro with Kevin Sullivan back in '97, and Sullivan beat the piss out of him. But someone was able to set that match up for him, and he got to come in. Regardless, he hates Superhuman, and every time I post it, he's got some kind of comment to say how much he hates this kid. Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of wrestlers who have been trained and stuff, they really don't like that backyard, wrestling stuff. So
you actually, I think you introduced me via Facebook to Superhuman for the first time, and now I watch all Superhuman's videos, and my wife absolutely hates it. She goes, "There's something wrong with you." I'm like, "This is just entertaining." You know what I mean? It's entertainment.
It's for all the gigolos and gigolettes.
That's it.
He holds a pinfall victory over the King of Sleaze, Joey Ryan. So,
wow.
That's a little bit crazy there too.
All right, so I want to make sure we get in the rapid fire round, but very quickly, because we got cut off last week. We have to do this. Dan, you're really good at bringing up these topics where you tell somebody, like, give me your top 3 or something. We're going to take a little bit of a spin on that for this question. And we just want to know, Ben said last week, best band of all time, Led Zeppelin. My take, highly, out there. I tell everybody, the Beatles. What's your take? Best band of all time?
So I'm just gonna clarify this. My favorite band is Sublime, but I'm not gonna put them as the best of all time because they're not.
Okay.
So if I were to be put on the spot, I think the Beatles, Led Zeppelin is a good answer. I'm not into Led Zeppelin though. I do really like the Beatles, but
my man, Dan,
I'm going with, because the front man sells the whole deal for me, Queen.
Wow. I like that. My mom would choose Queen. I respect that. That.
They were able to do multiple type of songs. It wasn't all the same.
Right.
I think both are great. I mean, the Beatles, I think if you ask anybody, I think the average person's going to say the Beatles.
Right.
But Queen, and I don't care what anybody says, that performance at Live Aid will go down as the best performance ever. I mean, I could rewatch that over and
Uh,
over and
uh,
over again.
yep.
I still think the movie didn't do Freddie justice, but that's neither here nor there.
All right. So
Queen was a good answer.
the rapid fire round now, Dan. We're not going to really get to dive into each of these, maybe for the sake of time, as much as we wanted to. But I'm going to fire these questions off, and you're going to have to respond as quickly as possible. Fair?
Yeah, whatever. I take a second to process, so just bear with me.
Yeah. That's fine. All right. So we need the 3 top poutine places in New Hampshire.
Chez Vachon,
Love it.
that's number 1. Tap House, New England Tap House. And number 3, because some places have changed. If Bar 1 didn't change the way they were doing things, Bar 1 would still be number 3. I'm going to say hopefully they've made some changes and Bar 1 is still 3. Peddler's Daughter's up there too.
Wow, Peddler's Daughter. I wouldn't have guessed that. Over in Nashville, huh?
Very
What
enjoyable.
About the best you ever had, Dan? Anywhere?
I get a lot of shit about this because I always say at the softball field, we go to St. Isidore for a tournament every year. This little place in Quebec, everybody speaks French. That's the best I've had. I had it one time and I was like, this is unbelievable. And then we went last year and my brother Bobby and all these other people, I can't believe he gave it such a high score. I go, I don't know. This is my favorite place to get it. But I think Shea might even have them beat too.
Wow. There it is. It's interesting, Dan. It's interesting because you corrected me on your last name, but you referred to Quebec as speaking French, and you know very well that they refer to it as Quebecois.
True, but I'm an American, and I feud with them when I go up there.
Yeah.
And I'm yelling, they're yelling at me, "Le oui," every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And questioning whether I'm blowing up the pitcher. So as much as I love Quebec, they're gonna be Quebec to me because they started with tiny pipes first.
All right, fair enough. All right, this is a hot one. This is a hot take now. Pippen or Jordan? And you've seen The Last Dance. Pippen, no question.
That's my guy till I die.
That a boy. More responsible for the Patriots' success, Brady or Belichick?
Belichick.
Wow.
I'm liking Dan. I'm really
Tom Brady's great, but I mean, Belichick's got to make that team every year. He's got to put the squad and the players there for him. Coaches, you got to put him there.
In the salary cap era, couldn't agree.
Speaking of teams, Dan, what is your most hated team of all time?
New York Yankees.
Any sport.
I hate the Yankees.
Attaboy. Okay. Ben, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, you have to lose one of these forever. Softball or wrestling?
Oh, Jesus. I'll eventually get old, so I guess softball. I'd still be able to watch wrestling.
Well, we kind of spoiled this one with the intro, but favorite wrestler of all time?
Shawn Michaels, but it's funny because when I met Mick Foley, I was so excited to meet Mick Foley, and the first thing I said, Mick, you're my second favorite wrestler. He goes, who's your first? I go, Shawn Michaels. He goes, oh, well, I guess that's a good pick. My buddy goes, why the hell would you even tell him that? Just tell him he's your favorite.
Oh, man. That's good. Shawn Michaels, Attitude Era guy. I appreciate it.
Oh, you got to love HBK. The showstopper, could put on a good match, could talk. Doesn't get any better.
Great finisher. Sweet chin music.
And now it's overused. It's the most overused move in pro wrestling. So thanks HBK. Super kick party.
All right. Go ahead, Ben.
What about, so this kind of goes off that. Who do you think is the most overrated and then underrated wrestler of all time?
Ooh. Oh, wow. Overrated wow.
You're not gonna hurt me, Dan. You're not gonna hurt this one, are you?
Overrated might be. People probably get some crap for this, but probably John Cena might be the most overrated. As much as I've grown to really love John Cena.
Yeah.
I think the most underrated, and I'll say this now, and not just because there's about to be a documentary on him tonight on Vice about the death of Owen Hart, but Owen Hart never really got to see his true potential before he passed
Uh,
away,
yeah,
falling from the roof of the Kemper Arena.
That's
I
right.
think Owen was on track to be the WWE champion, but I also think that his talent, more people appreciated after he died, and he really needed to be appreciated while he was here because Owen Hart could go and he could have done all he. It's really sad. There's a lot of other wrestlers, him and Brian Pillman. I'll put Brian Pillman there too.
Wow.
Another person taken way too soon.
No, that's that's interesting. I wasn't expecting Owen Hart, but I like that take a lot. Last question on the rapid fire round. Desert Island. You have one TV with a DVD player. You can only bring one show. What's the show?
So it's Sopranos.
Wow, over The Office still. Sopranos over The Office.
I watch Sopranos almost every night. I love The Office and will always love The Office because there's more
Right.
of The Office.
Yep.
But Tony Soprano will always be the greatest TV character of all time, and The
Wow.
Sopranos is just so damn good. It's just
Wow.
so damn good.
So I agree with you. So I will say, full disclosure, Dan, you and I have a lot in common here that I've learned today because Sopranos is my favorite show of all time. And I've actually sat back. I told Ben this. Sat back now, side by side comparison of Peaky Blinders, Sopranos, and The Wire. Because right now, those are like my top three. And Sopranos to me is still way above The Wire. Season 2 of The Wire was meh. But Peaky Blinders might be up there with Sopranos. I don't know if you've seen the show, but it's worth checking it out.
If you say it's in the same sentence, then I have to see it. If you're wrong, I'm going to be very upset. But
Fair enough.
I will concur with Nick. It's a great show. It is one of my top favorites. I know I brought up to you in the past. You really should watch Sons of Anarchy.
Yep.
But Peaky Blinders is up there with some of the best shows that I've ever watched.
Well, you see, and he talks about, too, to your point, Dan, the Tony Soprano thing, right? And the evolution of Tony as a character and the type of character he was on the show. The character played by Cillian Murphy in Peaky Blinders, his name's Tommy Shelby, is, to me, that character's story is right up there with Tony. So that's why I think you'd really like it.
Well, and then there's the other characters, too. I mean, his brother Arthur, right. Their cousin, they do such a good job of, creating that one intense character in the character that in Tommy Shelby, but every other supporting character is the character development on them is also amazing. So I would highly recommend it with Nick.
Yeah, check it out.
All right, Dan. Well, I'm not going to take you. We're not going to take you away from Sopranos any longer. Is there any wrestling on tonight? What do you got going on tonight? Anything you could recommend the viewers to watch?
Yeah, well, I guess Vice is going to have. So they've been doing the Dark Side of the Ring episodes, and they're going to end the season with Owen Hart passing away in 1999. Fell from the Kemper Arena. The anniversary of that is actually Saturday, May 23rd. I know exactly where I was when that happened.
Wow.
And it's been really good. A lot of stuff on there. A lot of people have done a lot of crazy stuff happens in the wrestling business, as you can see from this documentary. But I think this is gonna be really good. Martha Hart definitely never gonna let Owen Hart go into the Hall of Fame. But from what we hear is she is going to start selling Owen Hart merchandise, which has not been able to be purchased in 21 years. So look for that, I guess, on prowrestlingtees.com eventually.
I loved that answer. Just because I agree with you. I mean, aside from Owen Hart being so underrated, I think his story and his death was one of the most unexpected and tragic deaths in WWE history. I mean, I think Chris Benoit is probably up there as well as Eddie Guerrero. But Owen Hart is just the way that he died is crazy.
And Owen Hart, Eddie Guerrero, they got to have their days in the sun as world champion. It didn't happen. Owen, 34, and then and they both, the bet. Don't get me started on the Benoit Guerrero stuff because I don't know if I can take it, but I'd put Owen up. And like I said, Brian Pillman too, Flying Brian and the loose cannon Brian Pillman. He's definitely got I don't know why he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. because Brian Pillman would make people think what he was doing was real. I mean, the
Right.
guy ripped out his dick and started pissing in the ECW arena. The guy who,
Yeah.
he was living the gimmick that he was
Yeah.
portraying.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but anyways,
Well, Dan, we appreciate you jumping on, taking the time to talk to us, taking the time to talk to the
Yeah.
folks here listening, and for the folks listening tonight, take Dan's advice. Go watch Vice, or you could go watch Sopranos or Peaky Blinders. I am going to be roped into getting caught up with the wife on Vanderpump Rules. So you guys go enjoy all that stuff, and I'm going to watch a tacky reality show. But maybe,
Yeah,
but maybe I'll spot the next president. I could spot the next president on the show.
I'll probably be playing Call of Duty Warzone like a nerd, so I mean, I can't really speak to watching anything on TV.
All right, shameless plug for us, Ben. Right, like we need reach out to us. You watch this, you want to be on the show? The format's simple. Dan, I think you had a good time, right? Would you?
yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. I like it.
Yep. So reach out to us on Facebook, text us, however you need to get a hold of us. We're looking for folks like you to join the show and join the party. But all right, till next week.